He wielded her clan's sword to protect her. Oblivious, he now had to become her husband. Rael Duncan had never imagined his life would take a turn like this. He was a soldier, born on Earth, trained in the harshest environments, and tempered by years of military conflict. His mission today seemed like any other: protect the last of the Takara clan, a family known throughout the galaxy for their ancient lineage and exceptional combat skills. But as he stood at the gates of the Takara family's stronghold, something felt different. The Takara clan had always been mysterious. Their ancestral home, located on the lush planet of Rakari, was surrounded by rumors of power, ancient traditions, and a long history that stretched back to the earliest days of humanity's rise among the stars. Rael didn't know much about them, other than they had been allies in the interstellar wars. And now they were in danger. The Galactic Dominion, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had set its sights on Rakari. The Dominion spies had infiltrated the region, and a battle seemed inevitable. Rael's assignment had been straightforward: ensure the safety of Kira Takara, the young heir of the Takara clan. But there was something unusual about Kira. She wasn't like other people Rael had met during his missions. The stories surrounding her suggested she was more than just a leader's daughter. She was the last of her kind, a true descendant of warriors and the holder of an ancient weapon, the Sword of Eternity. The sword was a relic forged centuries ago, said to contain unimaginable power. Yet the Takara clan had kept it hidden, safe in the depths of their stronghold. Only the chosen heir could wield it, and no one had seen its true power in generations. Rael had no idea what he was about to face when he was assigned this mission. He thought it would be like all the others: keep the princess safe, fight off a few enemies, and go home. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened that day. It all started with a sudden attack. Rael was in the courtyard when the warning sirens blared. The ground trembled as ships from the Dominion appeared overhead, cutting through the sky. Without hesitation, Rael rushed to Kira's chambers. He had been told she was a strategic leader, someone who could hold her own, but today she was more than just a leader. She was the last hope of her people. Kira was already waiting for him. Tall and graceful, her black hair flowed behind her like a dark wave as she moved toward him. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, met his with a quiet intensity. But there was something else in her gaze, something uncertain, something filled with doubt. "You're here to protect me, Earth soldier," she said, her voice steady but carrying a hint of sadness. "But you should know, the Takara clan doesn't need protection. We never have." Rael blinked in surprise. He had expected a much warmer welcome. Instead, she seemed cold, distant. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised her hand to stop him. "I don't want to be protected," Kira continued. "I was raised to fight, not to hide." Rael nodded, understanding her frustration. He wasn't here to argue, though. He was here to do his job. "We don't have time for that now," he said firmly. "The Dominion is coming. We need to leave now." Kira hesitated for only a moment before nodding. They both ran toward the hidden chamber where the Sword of Eternity was kept. Rael had heard rumors about the sword, but he had never seen it for himself. As they reached the chamber, Kira opened the door with a swift motion, revealing the weapon resting on a pedestal. It was unlike any sword Rael had ever seen. The blade shimmered with an ethereal glow, and strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. Kira stepped forward and placed her hand on the hilt, but as soon as her fingers touched the sword, a low hum filled the air. Rael watched, transfixed, as the blade pulsed with energy. Kira's expression was tense, focused. She was trying to lift it, but something was wrong. The sword seemed to resist her touch, as if rejecting her. "What's happening?" Rael asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Kira replied, gritting her teeth. It's not accepting me." Rael took a cautious step forward. Something inside him urged him to reach out. He didn't know why, but as if compelled by some unseen force, he placed his hand on the sword's hilt. The moment his fingers touched the blade, a surge of energy shot through his body. His muscles tightened, his vision blurred, and for a moment he felt as if he were standing at the edge of the universe itself. The sword responded to his touch, humming with power, and before he knew it, he was holding it firmly in his hands. Kira stepped back, her eyes wide with shock. "What did you do?" Rael was speechless. He didn't know. He had simply touched it, but now the sword was his. It felt right, as if it had been waiting for him all along. "Is this possible?" Kira whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "The sword, it has chosen you." Rael looked at her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean, chosen me?" "The sword chooses only the worthy," Kira said. "It is said to bond with its true wielder, someone with strength, honor, and courage beyond measure. For centuries, the Takara clan has guarded it, waiting for the one who could wield its power. I thought it would be me. But now—" Her voice trailed off as she stared at him in confusion and disbelief. "I didn't ask for this," Rael said, looking down at the glowing blade in his hands. "I'm just a soldier. I was here to protect you." "And yet the sword has chosen you," Kira replied, her tone filled with a mixture of awe and frustration. "The sword chooses, not the other way around." Suddenly, the air around them shifted. The ground shook again, and the sound of explosions echoed in the distance. The Dominion was here. Rael tightened his grip on the sword, feeling its power surge through him. He wasn't sure what this meant or why the sword had chosen him, but he knew one thing for certain. He had a duty to fulfill. The Takara clan was in danger, and it was up to him to protect them. Kira's eyes softened as she looked at him, a new understanding dawning in her gaze. "We'll fight together," she said quietly. "We'll protect my people, but you'll have to become part of my clan now. Whether you like it or not." Rael's heart pounded. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew this was only the beginning. The sword had chosen him, and whether he liked it or not, his life was now bound to the Takara clan and to Kira Takara herself. The battle was coming. And they were ready. Rael had never believed in destiny. He had always been a soldier, a man of action and reason. The mission was simple: protect the Takara clan's heir, Kira Takara, from the Dominion. But now everything had changed. The sword of eternity had chosen him. A soldier from Earth, not of noble blood, now held the ancient weapon of the Takara clan. It was impossible, and yet here he was, walking beside Kira as they made their way through the halls of her clan's stronghold. Kira's face was unreadable. Her emotions were tightly guarded, and Rael could feel the distance between them grow with each passing day. She didn't want him as her protector. She had never asked for this. The sword had chosen him, not her, and she resented it. The weight of the sword at his side was constant. Rael could feel its power, a strange, humming energy that flowed through him. When he held the sword, it felt as though he could take on the universe itself, but at the same time, it terrified him. He didn't know how to wield it properly, and the pressure of carrying it was beginning to weigh on him. He wasn't a warrior, not like Kira. He wasn't meant to lead, to rule. He was just a soldier. Their journey had taken them deep into the heart of the Takara stronghold. The clan's military forces were preparing for the inevitable Dominion assault. Kira's family had always been warriors, but Rael could see the burden on her shoulders. The Takara clan had been mighty once, but their power had faded with time. Now they were the last bastion of resistance against the Dominion, and Kira was the only one left to carry the weight of that responsibility. "You don't have to do this," Rael said one evening as they stood on the balcony of the stronghold, looking out at the stars. "You don't have to carry this burden alone." Kira turned to face him, her expression cold. "I wasn't alone before. My clan, my ancestors fought and died for the Takara name. It's my turn now." Rael didn't know how to respond to that. He didn't understand her resolve. But he could feel it deep down. He knew that Kira was struggling, torn between the duty she had inherited and the reality of her situation. The weight of their mission pressed on both of them. Each day brought more tension, more battles, more losses. Rael had seen the scars of war all his life. He had fought in countless conflicts, but nothing compared to what was coming. The Dominion's forces were vast, relentless, and now, with the sword's power coursing through him, he felt as though he could take on the world. But he knew that wasn't enough. He needed Kira's leadership. He needed her strength. As they continued their journey, Kira began to open up to him, though only slightly. She didn't speak much about her past, but Rael could see the pain in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Her people had been betrayed, their stronghold infiltrated by enemies within. The Dominion had destroyed the Takara clan from within, stripping away everything they had built. It wasn't always like this, Kira told him one night as they sat around a campfire, the glow of the flames dancing in her eyes. Once, we were respected. The Takara were leaders, warriors. We fought alongside the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. Rael listened quietly, his fingers tightening around the hilt of the sword. He wasn't sure how to comfort her. He wasn't good with words, and Kira wasn't the type to accept pity. But now, Kira continued, her voice soft but filled with determination, now it's up to me to rebuild what we've lost. I have to restore our honor. I have to do it. Rael's heart went out to her. He could see how much it hurt her to speak those words. Kira wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her people, for a legacy that seemed impossible to reclaim. The days passed, and the Dominion's forces grew closer. Rael and Kira both knew that time was running out. Every decision, every move they made could mean the difference between survival and destruction. And yet, despite the growing tension between them, Rael felt a strange connection to her. It was the sword. He knew that now. The sword had bonded them, made them inseparable, whether they liked it or not. Rael's skills with the sword were improving, but not fast enough. Every time he trained, he felt the weight of his responsibility bearing down on him. The sword was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was not just a weapon, it was an extension of him, an extension of his will. And with each passing day, he grew more aware of the truth. He was no longer just a soldier. He was part of the Takara clan. Whether he wanted to be or not. One night, as Rael practiced with the sword in a secluded courtyard, Kira approached him. She had been watching from a distance, her eyes narrowed with curiosity. "Your form is improving," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "But you're still not ready." Rael stopped, lowering the sword. "I know." Kira stepped forward, her movements graceful and precise. She took the sword from his hands, examining it with a practiced eye. Rael watched her, wondering what she was thinking. Was she frustrated with him? Did she resent him for wielding the sword instead of her? Kira didn't speak for a moment. Instead, she raised the sword high above her head, the blade catching the light of the moons overhead. For a brief moment, Rael saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had once burned in her ancestors, the same fire that had made the Takara clan the warriors they were. "This sword isn't just about strength," Kira said finally, lowering the blade. "It's about conviction. It's about belief. You must believe in yourself, Rael. You must believe that you are worthy of it." Rael met her gaze, his chest tightening. "But I'm not like you. I don't have the same training, the same blood. I don't know if I can do this." Kira's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "You're more like us than you realize. The sword didn't choose you because of your bloodline, Rael. It chose you because you're willing to fight. You have the heart of a warrior. You just need to trust it." Rael nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. Kira's words were comforting, but they didn't take away the fear that clung to him. He wasn't sure if he could ever be the warrior Kira needed him to be. But he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't give up. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. The Dominion was coming, and he was going to fight beside Kira, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was thick. Rael could feel it in his bones as he stood on the edge of the Takara clan's stronghold, looking out over the vast battlefield. The Dominion's forces were closing in, and the planet Rakari seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the coming storm. Everything was about to change. Kira stood beside him, her posture straight and unwavering. Even now, with the weight of her clan's future hanging in the balance, she didn't falter. But Rael saw the quiet storm in her eyes, the fear, the uncertainty, the sense of responsibility that never seemed to leave her. She was still the heir of the Takara clan, the last of her kind, and yet she had never asked for this burden. The sword at Rael's side pulsed with an energy that seemed to grow stronger each day. Every time he touched it, it felt more like a part of him, and yet the weight of it grew. He wasn't a warrior like Kira, and though she had trained him in its use, Rael often felt as though he wasn't ready for what the sword demanded of him. He wasn't ready to be the protector. He wasn't ready to be the leader, but the sword had chosen him. There was no going back now. "You're quiet today," Kira remarked, her voice low, as if sensing the thoughts in his mind. "What's on your mind?" Rael hesitated before speaking. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this, Kira. You've lived your whole life preparing for this moment. I've only just begun to understand what this sword means, what it asks of me." Kira turned to face him, her eyes softening for the first time in days. "You're not alone in this, Rael. You may not have been born to the Takara clan, but you've proven yourself worthy. The sword chose you for a reason. I may be the heir, but we fight this battle together. You're as much a part of the Takara clan as I am now." Rael didn't respond immediately. Kira's words were comforting, but they didn't erase the fear inside him. He had seen war before, but this was different. This was no ordinary fight. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about the future of an entire people. "Together," he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. "But what if we fail?" Kira didn't answer him at once. She turned her gaze back to the battlefield below, her expression hardening. The enemy was vast, their ships darkening the sky like a storm cloud. Rael had seen their power firsthand, ruthless, relentless, and without mercy. The Dominion would not stop until they had crushed everything in their path, but Kira's resolve was unshaken. "Then we die fighting," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "But we won't fail, not if we fight with everything we have." Rael nodded, his heart beating faster. Kira had always been the one to lead. Now it was his turn to follow and to fight by her side. The next few days were a blur of preparation. The Takara clan's warriors trained relentlessly, the sound of swords clashing echoing through the stronghold. Kira's people were skilled, disciplined, but Rael knew that this wasn't just about physical strength, it was about unity. The Takara clan's legacy was built on honor, loyalty, and the bond between its members. And now they would have to fight together as one. Rael continued his training with the sword. Every time he held it, it felt more natural, the energy surging through him with each swing. But there was still a part of him that doubted. The sword had chosen him, but could he live up to its power? Could he lead? Kira watched him train from a distance, her eyes constantly on him. There was no denying the connection between them, the bond that had formed when the sword had chosen him. But Kira never allowed herself to acknowledge it. She couldn't. Not yet. Not when so much was at stake. One evening, as Rael finished his training, Kira approached him, her steps quiet but purposeful. "Rael," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Rael turned, wiping the sweat from his brow. "What is it, Kira?" For a moment, Kira hesitated. Her gaze flickered to the sword at his side, and Rael could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Are you truly ready to lead, Rael? To fight for something bigger than yourself?" Rael looked at her, his heart heavy. "I'm trying, Kira. I don't know if I'll ever be the warrior you need, but I'll fight. I'll fight for you, for your people." Kira's expression softened, but only slightly. "You don't have to be like me, Rael. You just have to be yourself. Trust in the sword, trust in us." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Kira didn't need him to be a perfect warrior. She just needed him to be there by her side to help her carry the weight of her people. and that was something Rael could do. The final battle was upon them. The Dominion's forces were close, too close. Rael stood beside Kira as they prepared for the fight of their lives. The Takara clan's warriors gathered behind them, their swords gleaming in the fading light. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the Dominion ships began to land. Rael could feel the energy of the sword coursing through him, a power that was both overwhelming and empowering. He had no illusions about what was coming. The battle would be fierce and many would not survive, but Rael was no longer afraid. He had Kira by his side, and together they would fight for the future of her people. "You ready?" Kira asked, her voice steady but filled with a sense of purpose. Rael looked at her, his expression serious. "Ready as I'll ever be." With a final nod, Kira turned and raised her sword high. "For the Takara clan," she shouted, her voice ringing out across the battlefield. The warriors behind her roared in unison, their voices echoing through the air. Rael felt the energy of the moment sweep over him. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for honor, a fight for a legacy. The battle began. The Dominion's forces charged forward, their weapons raised, their ships firing blasts of energy that tore through the sky. But Rael and Kira led the charge, their swords flashing in the sunlight as they cut through the enemy ranks. The sword's power surged with each strike, its energy amplifying Rael's strength and speed. Kira fought beside him, her movements as graceful and deadly as ever. She was a master of the blade, and Rael had learned much from her in the days leading up to this moment. But even with the sword's power, there was no easy victory. The Dominion's soldiers were relentless, and every step forward came with a price. But Rael refused to back down. With every swing of the sword, he felt the power of the Takara clan surge through him. And with every step he took, he felt the bond between him and Kira grow stronger. The battle raged on, and though the odds seemed impossible, Rael knew one thing for sure: they would not fail. Not while they stood together. The battle had reached its peak. Rael stood at the front of the Takara clan's forces, the sword of eternity gleaming in his hand. Sweat dripped down his forehead, his body tired from hours of relentless fighting. The Dominion's forces were relentless, but they had not broken the will of the Takara clan. Every step, every strike was a testament to the strength of their people, and Rael had become a part of that strength. Kira stood beside him, her sword raised high. The energy around them was palpable, crackling with the intensity of the battle. Together they fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized, each strike of their blades carving through the enemy ranks. Rael had never imagined he would fight for something this important, but now, with the sword in his hand and Kira at his side, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The Dominion's forces were vast, but they were beginning to falter. The Takara clan's warriors, under Kira's leadership, had pushed back the invaders, forcing them to retreat. Yet, Rael knew the true test was still to come, the final confrontation with the Dominion's leader, General Alker. The general had been the mastermind behind the attack on Rakari, and if they were to have any chance of restoring peace to the galaxy, they would need to defeat him. Kira turned to Rael, her expression firm but determined. "We need to end this now, Rael. If we don't, the Dominion will only return with more forces." Rael nodded, his grip tightening on the sword. "We fight to the end." Together, they pushed through the chaos of the battlefield, cutting through the last of the Dominion soldiers. The ground beneath them shook as explosions rang out, but neither of them faltered. The power of the sword coursed through Rael's body, its energy merging with his own, pushing him beyond the limits of human strength. But it wasn't just the sword that kept him fighting. It was his commitment to Kira, to her people, and to the future they would build together. As they reached the center of the battlefield, they saw him, the man who had started it all, General Alker. The Dominion leader stood at the heart of the destruction, surrounded by his elite guards. His dark armor gleamed in the moonlight, and his cold eyes met theirs with a look of disdain. "You're too late, Takara," Alker said, his voice low and mocking. "You've lost. Your people are broken, your planet is in ruins, and now you're standing in front of your own destruction." Kira stepped forward, her sword held firmly in her hand. "We will never surrender, Alker. This fight is not just for us, it's for the future of every free people in the galaxy." Alker's lips curled into a smirk. "You think you can defeat me? You, a soldier from Earth and the last of a dying clan. You're both weak." Rael stepped forward, the sword glowing in his hand. "I don't need to be a prince to defeat you. All I need is the will to fight." The clash of steel against steel echoed across the battlefield as Rael and Kira charged at Alker. The general's guard stepped in to defend him, but they were no match for the combined might of Rael and Kira. Together, they fought as one, their movements fluid and precise. The sword's power surged within Rael, guiding his strikes, making every movement feel natural. It was as though the sword had become an extension of his own body. But Alker was no ordinary warrior. With a wave of his hand, he summoned a dark energy that crackled around his body. He moved with deadly precision, his blade clashing against Rael's with a force that pushed him back. The energy in the air shifted, the battle taking on a new intensity. "You think you can defeat me with that sword?" Alker sneered. "It's nothing more than an ancient relic. You're just a man with a weapon you don't even understand." Rael gritted his teeth, refusing to back down. "The sword is not just a weapon, it's a symbol, and I understand it better than you think." Kira joined the fight, her blade flashing through the air as she launched herself at Alker. The general parried her strike, but he couldn't keep up with the speed and power of their combined attacks. Rael and Kira fought in perfect sync, pushing Alker back step by step. The energy from the sword amplified their strength, making each strike stronger than the last. But despite their efforts, Alker was a powerful foe. He struck with unrelenting force, and Rael could feel his strength beginning to wane. The sword was powerful, but it wasn't enough on its own. They needed more than just strength, they needed unity. Kira seemed to read his thoughts. She glanced at him, and in that moment, Rael knew what they had to do. They had to trust each other completely, as partners, as equals. "Kira," Rael said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion that gripped him. "Together. Now." Kira nodded, her eyes locking with his. Without another word, they launched themselves at Alker in unison. This time there was no hesitation. Their movements were fluid, their strikes perfectly timed. Rael could feel the sword's power guiding them, but it wasn't just the sword. It was the bond they had forged through their shared struggles. The sword had chosen him, but it was Kira who had shown him the true meaning of leadership. Together, they were unstoppable. With a final, coordinated strike, Rael and Kira brought their swords down on Alker's defenses. The dark energy surrounding him faltered, and in that moment of weakness, Kira's blade found its mark, slicing through the general's armor. Alker let out a roar of pain, his body crumbling to the ground as the power of the sword overwhelmed him. For a moment, there was silence. Rael and Kira stood side by side, their breathing heavy as they looked down at the defeated general. The battle was over. The Dominion had been defeated. Kira turned to Rael, her expression softening as the weight of the moment settled over her. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice filled with relief. Rael nodded, still feeling the rush of adrenaline in his veins. "We did, together." As the dust began to settle and the sound of the battle faded away, the Takara clan's warriors cheered. The enemy had been defeated and Rakari was free. But for Rael and Kira, this victory meant something more. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter they would write together. Kira looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Rael, you've proven yourself more than worthy of the sword. You've earned your place in my clan. And I don't know what the future holds, but I want you by my side. Not just as a protector, but as my equal, my partner." Rael's heart skipped a beat. He had never expected to hear those words, but in that moment he knew the truth. He had found a home, not just in the Takara clan but with Kira, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "We've only just begun," Rael said, his voice filled with conviction. "Together." As they stood there, the weight of their journey still fresh in their minds, Rael realized that the sword had not just chosen him as its wielder, it had chosen him for something even greater. A future, not just for the Takara clan but for himself and for Kira. The legacy of the Takara clan had been reclaimed, and now it was up to them to rebuild it.